encompass what we've learned and heard so far. And this is where the end of the Salvation Army ends, the era of them. And that was around about 2005, so not long ago. And what happened was that, you know, like I said, we had about 200, 250 people here at any one time for 108 years. So that was a lot of things going on this island, a lot of people. If you kind of think about over 108 years, a lot of animals, a lot of food being planted and moved around. But in 2005, numbers dwindled drastically, and that was because by then the AA Bridge program had been set up, which was the subsidiary of the Salvation Army Retreat, or Rehabilitation Centre, and it became part of our local community. And by then the Salvation Army had learnt that it was better to help people with addiction problems alongside their support networks, so that we could all learn together how to help these people, than it was to bring them out to an isolated island, isolate them from their support network, and then send them back and go, good luck. And they had much better success by doing that. So there were 15 people here in rehabilitation in 2005. They were about 3 months out from ending their time here on the island, but it just got too costly for the Salvation Army to upkeep and maintain the island. So in early mid-2005, the Salvation Army ceased their operation here on the island. What happened on that day specifically is the Salvation Army brought their ferry across with their brass band. The brass band lined Wharf Road, which had been built by them, and those 15 guests or clients and the staff that were here with them left the island to the brass band playing them off. The brass band fell in behind them, boarded the ferry, and the doors were closed. So it was a beautiful way to end the time here for the Salvation Army on the island. And then of course they started to think about what to do with the place. They still owned this island. So they hired a company called Boffa to start looking at a revegetation project. Now if you kind of look around you now, this was all planted out as farmyards for the cattle. Up here would have been the orchard. Over here would have been matrica from pine trees for windbreak, for the housing, and again, majority of that would have been paddocks for the cattle as well. They knew that they needed to do, especially in this part, a huge restoration factor for effluent runoff. So Boffa set about doing wetlands, and that is what is here in front of us and to the side of us. In fact, this one goes all the way up the gully, and that was to start giving back and putting good nutrients from all of that effluent runoff to the island. So these two wetlands were established in around about late 2005, 2006. In that time we had an amazing philanthropist couple looking for a conservation education project, and their names were Neil and Annette Plowman. They owned New Zealand Towel Services, so if we think back to the days when we were in school and we had those towels that we used to dry our hands on, that was their family business. Of course they did commercial linen supply as well at the time, and they just sold this business, and they wanted to give back to the people of New Zealand for supporting their family history here in New Zealand by doing a conservation education project. So they came over to the island and they had a look around, saw the good work that Boffa had been doing with the revegetation, loved the idea of the Salvation Army and what they had done here, and they thought, why not, let's make this the project that we want. And they discussed with the Salvation Army about buying the island, of course, with having a chapel, 108 years of history, and also a cemetery here on the island. The Salvation Army did not want to sell. So they settled on a 99-year lease agreement with right of renewal for another 99 years. So that was signed in late 2005, and the Rotorua Island Trust was erected to undertake the project on behalf of Neil and Annette. What happened then was that a whole bunch of people were brought over to the island to go through a revegetation project to plant, and also education about learning what the island was about, where we wanted to go to, and have our conservation aspect as well to it. So the beginning was to actually remove every single tree here on the island if possible. They removed over 30,000 macrocarpa and pine trees. So everything around you, apart from a few historic trees, was taken down. They brought the Southern Hemisphere's largest wood chipper. Now that would have been about half the size of this field we're sitting on. And each one of those trees was put through those wood chippers to create a mulch. Now that is because after we did our ground test, we found that we are literally standing on grey lacking clay. Not a very good planting medium. So that mulch was then set all over the island. About 3/4 of the island was covered in this mulch, because you can imagine the pile. And that created an alluvial planting soil. Then 7 contract planters were hired, and they set about planting the trees. Now, they planted 1,000 trees per man or per woman a day from 2007 to 2011, when the island was opened for the very first time in over 100 years to the public. Those men and women planted 350,000 native endemic plant species. From 2011 to date today, we've gone on to plant a further 50,000 plants. So we're around about 400,000 planted native endemic plant species here on the island. We're only 83 hectares, so not that big. So we're going to be quite a dense coastal forest. But of course with that comes more food for our foraging birds, more habitat. All of our planting was with that in mind. So we've got food sources and habitat sources for all of our New Zealand endemic birds to be able to sustain their lives here on the island. Yes, so you can just like imagine everything being stripped bare, and then everything that's come back has been done by hand. Those last 50,000 were done with corporate volunteers like our friend over here, who came with the Auckland Council about 14-15 years ago. Would have been part of those days. People like yourselves, we had public planting days where people came over and planted a couple of trees, and of course the staff that lived here on the island as well would have done a lot of that work to top it up. Any questions, guys? Yes?
When they took all the trees out and just switched them all, what happened to the animals?
So apart from, like, say, tui, we didn't really have any endangered species here on the island. We did have a translocation of weka in 2002 that were a gift from Takatoa Island, and those weka were removed from the island.